We've got people coming into the Zoom at the moment, which is really fantastic. We've had over 100 people register for this wonderful discussion with Noam today, so we're looking forward to welcoming you all here. We might get started just to respect Noam's time and everyone else's time, so that we can make the most of this Friday evening together, or Saturday, depending on where you are in the world. So firstly, thank you so much for everyone for joining us here for UX Rescue's meetup with our special guest Noam. We are very, very, very fortunate to have such a wonderful individual in our midst, sharing his time with us so generously. So we are very grateful for that. We would like everyone today to just come as you are. We would love to see you if you're comfortable turning on your video. That way we can have a really wonderful conversation and interaction and see everyone's responses. Children and pets, special guest appearances are always welcome, so please feel comfortable. We are recording today's session. It'll be available on our YouTube later, so just keep that in mind. As a little bit of a sense check and just to see who we've got here in our community today, on Zoom you can actually indicate with a thumbs up down in your emotions at the bottom of the panel there. So we'd like to just get a little bit of a thumbs up. Who here is attending this meetup as their first UX Rescue meetup that they've ever attended? Wonderful. I didn't think this through because I can't actually see everyone's responses because I'm sharing my screen. So I'm assuming everyone's provided their responses. Second question, just for Noam and I, to get a little bit of a sense check. Who is currently transitioning to UX? Put up your little thumbs up in your Zoom response, or you can show us with your thumbs. Great. And who is currently early career? So you're just on your UX journey with us. Put your thumbs up or pop it in the response. Awesome. These are two topics that we're going to have a really wonderful discussion about today, transitions and then getting comfortable in our journey. And Noam will be able to have a lot of wonderful, wonderful insight for us. What we're going to do is we're going to have questions coming through, hopefully from you all, engaging in this discussion as we go through. Please pop those on the Slack channel so we can keep the Zoom as clear as possible, and we'll answer those throughout the discussion. So just to get us started, if this is your first time meeting UX or being involved with UX Rescue in any of the work that we've done, who are we and what do we do? So UX Rescue, we're on a mission, and our lovely founder Dahi is here with us today, and she started UX Rescue earlier in the year with this real drive to create an impact in the world. So we can do UX in a lot of different environments, looking at financial services and all sorts. And what she was looking for was to create an environment, a space where we could create real impact. And so what UX Rescue does is we connect UX practitioners with organisations in need across the globe. And I have a really interesting stat here. So we have 1,500 members who are a part of our UX Rescue community. We're across 23 different time zones. I had to Google how many time zones there are. There are more than 24, Google said. We've got 117 active members on projects, and we have 19 projects. So the projects that we have going at the moment are across education, disaster relief, helping wildlife. We've got 19 in action, which is really exciting. The approaches that we use, obviously, we look at problem solving, we look at empathy, we use a design thinking approach, and we're very research focused. So our three guiding stars are looking at design thinking, looking at design impact, design awareness, and design impact. Did I say that twice? Design impact, design awareness, and what's our third one?
Social impact.
Oh gosh, this is what happens. Social impact. Thank you, Dahi. Very good. So again, this question of how we're making an impact, and everyone attending here today and watching on our recording, you can help us. You can join UX Rescue and you can buy a coffee. And the money that you use to buy the coffee is actually a way that we can help the organisations we work with. So like I said, we're working with 19 organisations at the moment, and this money helps us buy web domains or anything that we're doing with our work there. Here we go. That was the slide that I was looking for. Social impact, design impact, and design awareness. I got ahead of myself. I was getting too excited to get to know Noam and have this wonderful conversation. So you'll see a couple of us here have this beautiful screen behind us, the co-parents. So please make yourselves welcome and introduce yourselves to one another. So we have a wonderful team here supporting Dahi. I have all the faith that Dahi could manage this on her own. We've put our hands up and like to be involved as much as we can. All right, the bit that we've been waiting for, we have a wonderful guest here in Noam who's hosting UX Quest, who is available on UX Coffee Hours, who's a UX researcher. Noam, would you like to tell the community, if they don't know who you are, which we've all been fangirling in the last couple of days, you know, excited about this conversation. So for those who might not know who you are, share a little bit about yourself and why you're excited to be here with us today.
Thank you. So I'm a little embarrassed and mostly honored to be here. Thank you for such a kind introduction. And I really want to thank Dahi and Amelia and everyone involved for the invitation and for making me feel part of UX Rescue. You know, a fundamental value I have is remember where you came from. And it wasn't that long ago, well, maybe a little long ago, but not that long ago, that I was transitioning to UX, that I was early in my career, that I was struggling with multiple things. And few things bring me more joy, other than my family and a couple of other things, than helping people with that transition, than being a mentor and a coach and creating content and doing a bunch of things which are hopefully helpful to some of you. So I'm really, really glad to be here. I was born and raised in Israel, though I sound suspiciously British because my parents are both from England, Manchester specifically, die-hard Manchester City fans. And as an Israeli, I served in the military for a few years. That was kind of my first professional experience, and then became the UX lead back in 2006 for some of Israel's missile defense systems. And that was my first experience in UX. But after 6 years doing that, around 2012, my wife and I decided we wanted to embark on an adventure and to move to the United States. And so we did, and we moved to Central Illinois. If you haven't been to Central Illinois, it's basically cornfields and soy fields, and somewhere in the middle of all of that corn and soy, there's a fairly large campus, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign campus, which is where I got my PhD in psychology. I studied relationships and attachment primarily as part of the personality psych program. And my dissertation was about romantic relationships and online dating, among other things, which is a pretty hot topic these days. Wasn't as much of a hot topic then. And fun fact, I never got to online date before I met my wife 11 or so years ago. We then moved to Silicon Valley, which is where I live these days, in Mountain View, California. And I've worked for a few companies so far here. Airbnb. Airbnb are very much in the news these days because they're about to go public, which is really phenomenal. Then Intercom, which is a B2B company focused on messaging. And these days I'm the director of user research at Wealthfront, which is a financial technology company. And we only operate in the United States, and we offer banking, savings, and investment services. But beyond my kind of regular 9-to-5 job, or whatever the hours are, it's not really regular hours, I have a huge burning passion for mentorship and for content creation, which is why I've done or created or been part of the things that you saw before in the slide before. I created a YouTube channel called UX Quests, where among other things, I had like a whole season of UXR conversations with a bunch of researchers and research leaders. I am now part of the UXR Collective platform, creating a show called Journeys into Research, and the first episode is out. And I'm also on UX Coffee Hours for mentorship. And the one thing I'll say is that I'm so glad you all joined. And I always say in these sorts of conversations that I view this as the beginning of something, not the end. So I hope you get in touch on LinkedIn. I hope you email. I hope to continue to be involved with UX Rescue related events if they let me. And please do feel free to get in touch. I will try to help as much as I can. And if it's okay, I'd love to start with the gnarly topic of imposter syndrome. Is that okay with the
Please,
chief?
You go ahead.
So I wonder if anyone in the crowd today has experienced this, but when I share that I'm a psychologist in tech, I always get the same question. And I shared this in a conference presentation I gave a while back. Anyone guess the question? You can post it in the chat if you have a guess. Leave it in suspense here for a second. The question I always get is, what's a psychologist doing in tech? What's a psychologist doing in tech? And I got that question so effing often that I, a rather confident, almost narcissistic, I would say, whatever person, even I started to believe that I do not belong in this profession. Because what does it mean when countless people, and I mean that literally, countless people ask you, what are you, the person with your training, doing in tech? And so at some point I decided, okay, enough is enough. Supposedly I'm a researcher. I have the training of a researcher. I should probably just do some research. Let's actually answer that question. What is a psychologist doing in tech? And the best way to answer that was to go back to the past and figure out where UX research even began. And what I found was not surprising, but rather reassuring. I found that arguably UX research began in Bell Labs, the famous Bell Labs, named after Alexander Bell, of course. And there were a couple of specific projects in Bell Labs. One of them was completely transforming airplane cockpits, and the other was inventing the modern telephone. And both of those projects were led by what today we would call UX researchers, but then they weren't called that. And they were both psychologists. And so it turns out that two of the many, many founders of the industry were in fact psychologists. And I realized that it wasn't about me being an imposter in this industry, or that my background isn't relevant to this industry. This was about people's very narrow view of what psychology is and what psychology could be. And when most people imagine a psychologist, certainly my parents, my parents always thought I'd be sitting on a chair with a beautiful moleskin notebook or something and pen. I never use real paper or pens these days for anything. In front of a patient who's lying on a comfortable, probably expensive couch doing therapy. But as obvious as this may seem to some of you, perhaps, you know, that's still the image that most people have of psychology, and it's limited to that. And I almost fell for it. I almost completely lost my confidence. And I realized two things, which, yeah, therapy for stakeholders, exactly, Lacey. And then I realized a couple of things as I continue to embark down on this journey, okay? And remember these two things. Number one, I discovered that so many of my talented peers and friends in this community, really grateful to know them and learn from them every single day. They are incredible researchers and research leaders, not despite of their background, but because of their background. For example, in that presentation, I shared the story of Behzod Sirjani, who used to be a senior researcher at Slack and has since started his own studio. I believe it's named Yet Another Studio, which is a fantastic name. And he is, among other things, a photographer. He has many identities, but one of them is as a very talented photographer. And it came to no surprise to me, at least, that it's actually thanks to him starting in photography that he is one of the most incredible visual thinkers I've ever encountered in our profession. So again, like, what's a photographer doing in UX research? Well, first of all, he trained in research as well, but it's actually his photography that wasn't a barrier, wasn't an issue, didn't hold him back, didn't waste his time, but rather it's what's made him such a phenomenal researcher. And the other thing I came to realize is, you know, I'm kind of I love language, I love etymology, I read dictionaries for fun. I want to read you, let's bring it up, the definition of imposter, okay? A person who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. Who are you pretending to be? Who would you pretend to be if you were an imposter, any of you? Who? What's the correct thing to be a UX researcher? The answer is nothing. There's no correct thing to be. You're all researchers, whatever you are. I don't know you, but I know you're researchers. And I know you couldn't even be an imposter if you wanted to, because there is no such thing as the exact formula, the exact precise training, the single route which leads you to become the best UX researcher or designer or anything for that matter. We just don't live in that time anymore. We're not in that period. Our role, I'm not sure everyone here is a researcher, but I'm a researcher. There is no single training for research. And so for me as a manager these days, as the leader of the research function at Wealthfront today and in the future, I'm sure other places, I don't look for the perfect researcher because that would be a complete waste of time. I look to build a team of hopefully incredible diversity, people who are coming from a multitude of backgrounds that together can help us as a team, as a company, understand people in the best way possible, because people have such complexity to them, such complexity. And it's impossible to understand a fraction of that complexity without a diverse team. And so there are many teams out there where you are needed if you are trying to transition into UX. Many teams. Go find them. I heard today, I had an incredible conversation with, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just had my internet. Tell us about the incredible conversation, then I'll see if the question's still relevant. I
had an incredible conversation today with a researcher based in San Francisco, in a B2B company. Never mind, I don't want to, you know. And he said something. He said, I have come to believe that, or a mentor told me that you cannot overcome imposter syndrome. You can only, similarly to like mindfulness, you can only kind of learn to live with it. And I think this person is brilliant and has an amazing future ahead of him. And I'm hoping to feature him on one of the Journey into Research episodes soon. But I strongly disagree with that particular sentence that he uttered in our conversation today. I do not believe for a second that imposter syndrome is something that you need to learn to live with. On the contrary, I genuinely believe that you should banish it because it doesn't make any sense. And I pride myself of supposedly being a rational person and again, a language lover. And I cannot find any universe in which I could be an imposter, even if I wanted to. And so I'm not going to live with that for 1 second more. And I encourage you to not either, because you don't have to. It's not a thing. The only person who should have imposter syndrome is, I don't know, the imposter. Whoever came up with the idea of imposter syndrome should probably be a bit worried. The rest of us are fine. The rest of us are fine. And I wanted to start with that because we all belong here, have absolutely no doubt about that. Let's move on and talk about other things. Amelia, you want to ask a question now?
I was interested, you were talking about building your team, and I love this essence, this idea of don't have imposter syndrome. So can you talk to us a little bit more about when you're building your team? Is it mindset? Is it methods? Is it previous experience? How can people tell their personal story when you're looking to position yourself as in one of the roles that you might be hiring for?
Yeah, so I told Casey, who's here earlier today, if you want to be in one of the roles that someone is hiring for, do the role that someone is hiring for. So this is an interesting concept, but it's a really clever trick. Okay, let me teach you a trick of how to get a job. So what I told Casey is, at least in the US, we say, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. As you may notice, I don't care about how I dress, and most of my t-shirts are tech t-shirts that companies send me for free, therefore I never have to go shopping. So I don't believe in dressing for success, and also I have the privilege of being a white man in the United States, a white extroverted man in the United States. So I have so much privilege up to beyond my eyebrows that no one cares about what I wear anyway. I do want to acknowledge that we don't all have that. Rather than dressing for success and dressing for the job you want, not the job you have, I believe in doing the job you want. And so when I interviewed for Facebook a few years ago, as an example, I was asked to present a hypothetical research project rather than my own research. And I thought to myself, well, hypothetical research project is nice. It's not bad. Like, we could keep it hypothetical, but why not actually do the research? Wouldn't that shock people if I ran the survey, did the interviews, actually spoke to people about what I'm proposing and showcase real results? Be the researcher you want to be rather than the one you are. And I did it, and I got an offer. And I even told Casey that 5 years after I presented this, Facebook actually went ahead and made the idea I presented a reality. And I have proof. I have the Google, the Google deck with the dates and everything. Did they do it because I made a stupid presentation for a few people? No. That's just a kind of a coincidence. But I put in the work, I put in the research, and the research didn't lie, I guess. So that's one thing I wanted to say about the topic. Another thing is around storytelling. Storytelling is a foundational skill. Please don't ask questions in the Slack or here about soft skills, because I am allergic to the term soft skills. It doesn't do them justice. It doesn't sound good. Soft skills are foundational skills. And they are the skills that so many people are missing. Can I curse a bit in this meeting? Is that okay to use some? I don't give a shit if you know how to run a card sort or not. I honestly don't give a shit. I can teach you to do a card sort in I don't know, an hour or something. So that's not a big deal. But, oh, I think someone got hurt here, my baby, apparently. Um, but what is a big deal is things like being able to tell a crisp, clear, coherent narrative. It's so, so important. And I wonder, maybe you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down or whatever Zoom enables. How many people here in your academic training or any training ever studied anything to do with storytelling, with narrative building? How many of you? I imagine if you studied English, you did. I imagine if you studied media or communications, maybe you did. Maybe if you studied theater or something like that, you did. But just based on the reactions, I'm seeing very few thumbs up. The fact is, certainly a psychologist, yeah, exactly, not at school, right, Natalia? The fact is, certainly as a psychologist, I never studied that at school or anywhere official, but I took years to study every single book, article, podcast, whatever, master classes with people who know so much more than I do about storytelling. And it has been pivotal to my career. So, so important. So much so that I just want to cover very quickly kind of the, I tend to think in threes because I'm like obsessed with the number 3. It's kind of embarrassing. There's kind of 3 layers to storytelling, okay? The first layer is the foundational layer, because a good story is a good story is a good story. You might have heard of frameworks like the hero's journey, which I love. That's a classic storytelling framework which works in so many contexts. It's incredible. So the first layer you want to study is great storytelling. And you don't learn that from researchers, by the way, or UX folk. You learn that from screenwriters, from authors, on platforms like Masterclass, which I mentioned earlier, and I just love it, or various books, which I can send out a list later on to in the UX Rescue Slack or something if people are curious. The second layer, once you're a foundational storyteller, no problem. Once you're a foundational storyteller, is the layer of being able to be a great presenter. Just in general, not a research or design presenter or UX presenter, just a great presenter. My favorite author and person and expert on that level is Nancy Duarte. I talk about her all the time. She wrote a bunch of books like Resonate and Slideology, and most of what I know about just being a great presenter, once I have my narrative crafted, my storyboard, I learned from her. And she's basically coached every single TED speaker. If you've seen a TED talk you like, she's probably coached that person. And then the third layer of storytelling is, at least in my case, research storytelling or storytelling with data. Because ultimately, at least in the profession of research, we're not just storytellers, we're storytellers with insights, with data, with evidence. And so we need to know how to visualize data correctly and present data correctly and so forth. So storytelling is absolutely foundational. And so often I get asked about, a method or skill, card sorting. Card sorting is okay. It's a good method. I don't mean to disrespect anyone who enjoys card sorting, but it's not as important by far. So keep that in mind. And one more thing about, and I'm not sure I'm fully answering here, Melia, so tell me if not, but one thing about building a team, I made this video, it garnered a lot of attention and hate email and angry reactions. The video was, there's no such thing as a generalist. At least here in the US, most companies are looking for mixed methods researchers or designers who are also researchers, quantitative and qualitative researchers, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't believe that's a thing. I believe that we use that term, but really we're simply mediocre at a lot of things rather than building up expertise in something. And so I might be different from a lot of other directors of research out there, but the way I think of things, I want to build a mixed methods team rather than find mixed methods individuals. And I just encourage you to do two things. One is you have to play the game by the rules of the game. So if most places are looking for a mixed methods researcher, you need to learn, several different methods, at least enough to quote a friend of mine, Matt Gallivan, who's the director of research at Slack, just enough to be dangerous. Not literally dangerous, don't harm anyone with your research. Dangerous in the sense that you know how to run a survey. You know the 20% of things to know about surveys, for example, in order to be 80% effective and efficient with surveys in this case. So that's number one. You do have to play by the rules of the game. But number two, and not less important, is respect the importance of expertise and build expertise. Always be thinking, how can I build expertise? And then, maybe even more importantly, how do I share that expertise with others? Because we're not going to go anywhere. This community, our profession, will go nowhere if we don't build expertise and then share it. And that's part of why I'm here today. If you consider me an expert in anything, I want to share what I know. But for that, you have to build up expertise first. So does that fully answer your question, Amelia, or did I miss anything?
It's a really, really good point. I think you covered off, and I packed so much into that question. I think you've covered off across it all in terms of, are you needing to develop those skills before or after? And it sounds like who you are and what you're sharing, who your story is, you need to have the skills that they're looking for, but the technicalities we can then pick up. And it's interesting looking at what people are hiring for as well. So one of the questions that has come through, Alenka asked, we were looking at the Nielsen Norman paper recently that came out looking at that 1 to 5 to 50 ratio of, you've got research to designers to engineers. Mm-hmm. What is your response to that research and the opportunity for us in UX moving forward?
I mean, they do great research. So first of all, my response is it's probably accurate. From my experience, it is accurate. So that needs to be respected. One thing that comes up for me looking at that research is I am a huge believer in the value of mentorship. Huge. I love being a mentor. I love being a mentee. And the fact is, whether you're the mentor or the mentee, you're both teaching and learning. Again, let me repeat that. As a mentor, you are teaching and learning. As a mentee, you are teaching and learning. It's completely bidirectional. One of the hardships of being a team of one is the difficulty to get mentorship. And I came to this realization a while back, which maybe some of you did too. It's kind of dumb, but good thing I came to it. The realization was, you don't have to limit yourself to mentorship within the organization you're part of. So even if you are forced to be a team of one, because we don't all have the privilege of choosing the exact job we want, and we don't necessarily get 10 offers at a time when we're searching for a job. So okay, you're a team of one, that's the reality, fine. But if you want to grow, especially if you're early in your career, you need mentorship. You need to be hearing other ideas and getting out of your bubble. And so I really encourage people, if you are in that situation, to find mentorship externally using platforms like UX Coffee Hours or anything. And one thing my grandmother taught me, which was a great lesson, was that if you don't ask for something, you're not going to get it. So if you want mentorship, ask for it. And you're going to be so surprised, I promise you, pleasantly surprised, how many just nice people there are out there who would be willing to talk to you and happy to help. And in fact, I see at least a couple of names here who I've spoken to in the past, whether they got to me coincidentally or through UX Coffee Hours. And it's lovely to see. And I hope that list just continues to grow. Being a team of one is tough. But here's another thing. When I left Airbnb, one of the reasons was I was feeling too comfortable, way too comfortable. I had it all. I had an amazing team to support me. I had every single tool in the world, a crazy good research ops team. Research ops is so important these days, and they were just phenomenal. Off-sites, making dim sum together, sushi, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the extravagance of it. It was really bonkers. And I'm a firm believer that constraints are a marvelous thing, both in a user experience and also as a learning mechanism. When you put yourself in a constrained environment, such as being a team of one, that's a huge constraint. That is a driver of learning. And that's a marvelous thing. So the bad news is, as a team of one, it's all on you, and it's going to be tough, and it's going to be long hours, and it's going to be hard. But you will learn more in those years than you will learn ever, perhaps. And that's a good thing. So if you end up in that situation, or you are in one, know that there are advantages to it, and hopefully you make the most of it. You learn a ton. You seek external mentorship, and then at some point you join a larger team when it becomes a possibility to experience that as well. It's important to experience both. I've been a team of one, and I've been in a team of 100.
It's so valuable and so reassuring and encouraging to hear you say that and to speak to those experiences that you've had and to share those with us. And to your point, about for us coming through as transitioners or as early career UXers, the generosity of mentors to share their stories and their experiences with us is so lovely. We've seen in the chat come up, the UX coffee hours and ADP lists. So we're very, very fortunate to have those opportunities. I've got a question here from Lacey. I know she's on the call as well, but Lacey's particular question, she says, can you talk more about what you look for in applications when you are hiring? So coming back to that point before that you were making about methods versus mindsets, current skills versus future skills.
Yeah, and I see many questions in the chat here as well. I'm not sure if you're going through those, but happy to answer everything before we finish. I also told this to, sorry, Casey, like we had such a lovely conversation earlier. Now you've heard it all. You've heard all the good stuff. The number one thing I look to see in an application and look to hear from people is your why. You need to have a great why. Why are you here? Why do you care? Why should I care? It's so, so crucial. It's so, so crucial. What are we looking for as hiring managers? We are people first and foremost. We just want to work with kind, humble, talented people who care about the same thing we do. The less naive version of that is that, at least in the US, all of us in tech get a small bit of equity in companies. And so our financial future is tied to the success of the company. So we want to be working with people who actually care about that future, because that's the only way we're all going to succeed and hopefully, become huge millionaires and retire early on some fancy island. And that's actually the number one thing that's always, often, not always, missing for me. I really want to feel that passion. Again, skills can be taught, passion cannot. So that's one thing. The second thing is just a basic fit. It kind of pertains to the why, but not completely. There are times in life when you should be aiming in all directions, and just trying your best to find some solution to a problem. But job applications are not one of those cases. And it's tragic to me to see people applying to jobs with me, for example, where I can just tell they're not a good fit. And not because they're missing like a single thing. Often underrepresented minorities stop themselves from applying to a position because they're missing one thing. That's not good. no one has it all. No one's perfect. So do apply if you're missing one or two things. That's okay. I'm talking about the complete lack of fit. You're wasting your energy on jobs that aren't for you. And there's an opportunity cost to that, right? You could be applying to jobs that are a great fit for you, and you have much more of a chance. You also need to leverage, again, going back to the notion of playing by the rules of the game. I'm not sure what Lacey meant by applying, or like what I hope to see in applications. But honestly, these days, at least in US tech, we barely get to applications because all we look at is referrals. Companies can hire people using 3 methods: passive recruiting, applications, and referrals. Passive recruiting is when a recruiter approaches you and says, "Hey, I see you've been at Wellfund for 2 years. That's a very long time for a millennial. Aren't you ready to move on to something else? I mean, 2 years. How loyal are you anyway, And then they'll lure you in with the latest round of funding they got and, the incredible catered lunches. The second method is applications, going on LinkedIn, clicking that button, submitting your resume. We get so many, we can't get a handle on them. And so for better or for worse, and there's a lot of worse, by the way, I'm not saying it's a great method or that it has no disadvantages, but for better or for worse, we focus on referrals. We look at people who are already working with us recommend. That's just a reality. So if you get those referrals, you have a good fit, and you have your why, you're already in a great position. And then let's not forget that we all have personal and professional brands these days. And it goes both ways. I'm well aware that if you search for me on Google, you'll find a bunch of things, including some embarrassing TikToks. That's okay, and if I search for you, I will find things as well. And I'm going to search for you. So don't just think about what you're putting in your application. Think about your entire personal brand, who you are, because I'm going to be looking, and other hiring managers are too. So that's a few points to think about when it comes to that stuff.
They're really, really, really good points. And I love that concept of, like you said, have your why, be really clear on what that is. And as we were talking before, weaving in that story and that narrative of where you've come from and where you're going, and how the skills and the experiences that you've had. We've had a couple of comments in the chat, Denise is a food technician, and Renuka was an architect, how those experiences wrap into that why of where we're going. Now, I'm conscious of your time, and I don't want us to go over time. We have been really, really appreciative of the conversation that we've had today and the opportunity to speak with you. If there was one last thing that you could tell the UX Rescue community or up-and-coming UXers in general, would you have a go-to line that you'd like to share?
That's a good question. As I ponder about that, again, thank you so much for having me. And I'm more than happy to stay on until we answer everyone's questions. So if you don't have to close the Zoom, I'm happy to stay, although I thank you for being respectful of my time. So we'll do that after I answer your question. I just think it's such an exciting time to be part of this community. And I mentioned this before we started this Zoom, but when I got started in UX, like, there was no community, and I didn't have specific places to go for mentorship. One of the best ways to transition into a community and into UX is to be part of communities. What you are doing right now, being part of this conversation, is a fantastic step towards, being what you want to be or growing in the ways you want to grow. And you should leverage as many of those communities as possible. I don't use Slack for work. We're not allowed to for security reasons. It's a long story. We use an embarrassing piece of software called Mattermost. But I use Slack on my personal computer on this one, and I'm part of many research communities. And it's so nice to be part of those and to learn from people from all over the world and just keep up with what's going on with research and research ops and various methods and books and conferences. But I want to add something to that. In the field of UX, we work in cross-functional teams. We work with product managers and data scientists and marketing people and content strategists, and the list goes on. And one of the keys to success, in my opinion, is understanding those other functions. When I was in grad school, I was on the 4th floor of the building, surrounded by personality psychologists who do exactly the same thing as me, study a very narrow field, and we were all kind of the same. One of the best parts of working in UX is this exposure to so many worlds and so many backgrounds. And by the way, my father-in-law is an architect, and I've learned so much from architecture, talk about architecture. But in order to effectively work with these cross-functional collaborators and succeed and have impact in the company you're working for, or going to work for, you need to understand their worlds too. And so, first of all, like my one big last thing is yes, you're here. Yes, you're clearly already part of the community. Immerse yourself even more, because it's one of the best things you can do. And I didn't have that chance early on, but you do. But then the second thing is, if I am at all successful, it is partly because I have researched and become much more empathetic than ever before to my cross-functional partners. And I take a good 10 or 20% of my week or my weekend to read something that has nothing to do with research, to listen to a product podcast, to read a data science newsletter. Because that's the real trick. You might be a team of one, but you're never truly a team of one, because research is a collaborative thing. And I'm not going to get into the whole should we democratize research or not arguments, because that really will take us until well into the night. At least in Mountain View, it would be night. But regardless of whether you believe research should be democratized or not, the fact is these are cross-functional collaborative relationships. And you will only succeed if you understand their world, their perspective. If you can speak their language, then you'll be successful. So that's my big thing. And now I'm happy to honestly just first of all answer the questions we already got. And then if anyone else has a question, then let me know. And if we do run out of time, then connect with me on LinkedIn and be in touch. I'd love to. I'm seeing something on storytelling and what's the best method. Maybe I'll take that from Suki. Video is incredibly powerful. When I was thinking about how I want to create content, I chose video because there's something really, really powerful about video. And we've seen this at Wealthfront recently in an incredible way. If you want to have impact, if you want to convince the board of your company, the CEO, the executives, your stakeholders of something, the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to show them video directly from users, directly from clients. When you see, there's two especially powerful things which can only really be seen on video. One is pain. To really feel the problem that someone is having. Pain is so noticeable on video. We are trained to recognize it. Just like we're trained to recognize all other emotions, which I'm seeing as I look at some of your faces. And so, you know, every great narrative starts with a problem and pain and conflict. Every great product starts with pain and a problem that no one else is solving, and it's a big one. And on video, you can really showcase that. The second thing you can showcase on video really, really well, and not in another medium as well, is excitement. Excitement for what you're building. You know, people begging you, like, you know, we were about to pay someone yesterday for a research session, $150 gift card, Amazon. That's nice. You know, it's good money for like less than an hour. Do you know what they said on video? This worked so well afterwards. I don't care about the gift card. When are you releasing this feature? I just want this feature to happen. They just saw this, you know, prototype. Incredible. The board of directors saw that today. They were drooling. They were just throwing money at the CEO, like, here's money, hire people, build it, go for it. So I'm a believer in video. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I doubt I'll be proven wrong. And then Bai Pai, sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, also asked about an unfortunate mentorship encounter where the mentor had a bad meeting, and then during the mentorship meeting didn't want to listen to anything, just wanted to share his point of view. Any suggestions? Look, I started my day-to-day with an awful event, which I'm not going to get into, but it's been a bad day, to say the least. Luckily for me, and hopefully for you, the way I deal with things is by distracting myself and doing things that bring me joy. And again, few things bring me joy more so than these sorts of events. But some people don't deal well with those sorts of things. And my best advice to you is, you know, if you're in that sort of mentorship encounter, which is very unfortunate, I would just say, listen, I can tell we're not aligned in this conversation. You're not in a good headspace. I really appreciate your time, but I would love to have this conversation another time, if that's okay, because I can tell that this isn't the best time for you. And, you know, any good mentor would agree to that, and if not, find another mentor. That's really, I think, sorry, that's not exactly, you know, genius advice, but it's the best I have. And you know, being a mentor is a choice. It's a tough choice. It's a lot of work, but it's so fulfilling. And so, you know, mentors have to come to a decision that they want to listen and be helpful and teach you something new and learn something new, or do they just want to share their perspectives and get out of there? That's not true mentorship. So what can I say? Did I miss any questions, or did anyone want to add anything, or just unmute yourself and ask whatever?
We have some questions from Slack, our Slack channel. Amelia,
Yeah,
can you go through some
happily.
of them?
Yep.
Beautiful. All right, so the questions. So a question, even now, do you ever have to teach yourself how to do something before conducting research or joining a new company?
How do I teach myself something? Was that the before I?
Yeah. Do you ever have to teach yourself how to do something before conducting research or joining a new company? Is that on the call?
Absolutely. All the time. You know, it's funny. Engineers have Stack Overflow. Do you know Stack Overflow? So engineers have their secret Google called Stack Overflow, which is basically a community and search engine for bits and pieces of code, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel every single time. And so amazingly, most of the code that engineers write often comes from little sources like that, which is kind of funny. And why wouldn't it be the same for research, right? I mean, I'm always, every single day, learning something new or teaching myself something new. that could be helpful. One thing we do often at WellFed, for example, is diary studies, and we use a platform called D-Scout for diary studies. And talk about communities, D-Scout have a marvelous community, people nerds, and they put out endless quality content, which I love. I have learned a ton before every single diary study about kind of, you know, what sort of items I can use, and how to structure missions or parts properly. So yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't yet have a Stack Overflow for research. That would actually be a great project. Do Australians say project? I think you do, right? It's like you have a different project. Is that what you say?
Project.
Project. Yeah, it's a bit different. Project. I love that. Yeah. Anyway, that would be a good project to do the Stack Overflow for research. I encourage anyone out there who wants to do that to go for it. But yeah, and look, it's also possible that, you know, maybe you're joining a new company where you are expected to, for example, run more surveys, and you haven't really done much survey work before. So, you know, you can get a whole PhD in survey science, literally. I recommend the University of Michigan if you choose to go down that path. But you probably won't do that, and that's okay. There are, you know, several books and resources just on survey science, on what good sampling is, and, you know, good questions, and what sort of scales you should avoid. Like, you probably shouldn't use agreement scales, and NPS is the most terrible thing ever invented in history, and I can go on and on. But you know, absolutely, sometimes you have to train yourself. Also, after this session, please let us know how much you'd recommend me as a guest lecturer for the second time, from 0 to 10. How much would you recommend me to a friend or a colleague? Such a helpful question.
We have a survey we're planning to send out after.
So thanks everyone.
We will give
Infinity.
we won't filter anything out, and we will let you know the honest feedback that we receive. I won't say anything that possibly influence the answers, but yeah.
I'm seeing more questions come in. Advice for those trying to figure out what they want to do in UX from Summer. Summer, do you mean like design versus research, or what type of area, like education versus health? Or what do you mean when you say like figuring out what you want to do? Are you here, Summer? I see you down there. Can you unmute?
Yeah, so like research versus IA, stuff like that. How do you figure out what you want to do in UX? I'm currently an undergrad right now, and I'm still trying to figure out what kinds of internships to apply for, and I'm not really sure what I am and am not qualified for.
Okay. So a couple of things. First of all, at some point I realized that one of the shitty parts of adulthood is that you have to make tough choices, which, you know, it just comes with the territory. And so I do recommend making that choice earlier rather than later, because at some point it's going to be difficult to find a place that's kind of a good fit for you. But I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. You know, you mentioned, what am I qualified for? And I don't think it's about that. I think that's the wrong question, right? I'm not sure what you're getting your undergrad in, feel free to say, but this is about your interests, I would suggest, and your passions, rather than your qualifications. You will go on to earn those qualifications. You might get a master's, you might do a boot camp, you might experience internships. You're going to get those qualifications, you're going to get that experience. The question is what you want to do. So if we take design and research, for example, they are in my opinion, fundamentally quite different, right? Designers and researchers are both problem solvers to a certain extent, but researchers are much more passionate about developing a deep understanding of the problem, whereas designers are typically much more passionate about building the solution, right? And often designers are forced to be researchers as well. It happens often, and they do a good job. They have, you know, solid training in research often, but you know, what do you find yourself thinking about, contemplating about, or doing when you have some time for yourself? You know, do you focus on the problem or on building up the solution? And based on that, maybe it'll help you decide. And the good news is you can do one internship 1 year in research, another in design, another year, and then decide. That's not a bad idea. You don't have to decide quite yet, but soonish.
I've got a question, kind of backpacking on what Summer said, and I think this is a little bit similar to what you were just talking about. So at UX Rescue, as we grow and we have a lot of applicants for each project, we started interviewing people. And one pattern that really stood out to me and Amelia was that we see so many people applying for researcher role or both researcher and designer role, which we find, you know, to your point, fundamentally very different. But when we look at their portfolio, all we see is design work, and how they call themselves on their portfolio is "I'm a designer." I was wondering if you've ever encountered a situation like that, and if you were to see that, like, what would you tell those applicants?
Yeah, I have encountered that. I mean, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. I like to see focus, honestly. You know, one of the most important things, I think, to be a great researcher is humility. Now, I'm not the most humble person you're going to meet in your life, but I try to be. And I just find it not humble when people's LinkedIn reads, you know, designer, researcher, leader, Forbes 40 under 40, mentor, coach, influencer, TikTok extraordinaire. I mean, come on, you know, maybe pare it down a bit, maybe make some choices. It's so hard to be good at any of those things, not to mention all of them. And there's a reason why you're seeing what you're seeing. It's that it's one thing to present yourself like that. It's another to actually showcase that work in the portfolio, right? So you say you're a designer, you say you're a researcher, you say all these things, but then you look at the portfolio and it's actually quite clear what you are. And it's not all of those things. It's one of those things, maybe. And so I'm not sure where exactly you wanted me to take this, but I just think that the advice I got before I applied to grad school is still really good advice today. It's the 3 F's: fit, focus, and future. Like, what am I focused on? Why do I fit into this team, this organization? And what do I envision for the future? My future with you, this company's future, like, what am I excited about? I think when you can showcase those things, both in your LinkedIn, your portfolio, etc., you will succeed in, you know, your job search and your career. But if you don't have those 3 components, it's going to be pretty difficult. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure.
And we've got a couple more questions still coming through. So I think we've very much taken you up on that very generous offer of yours about your time. So up to you, Noam, in terms of when you would like to call a timeout on questions.
Sure, we can take a few more. Which I'm kind of lost in the chat at this point. Do you want to just read to me what the question you want to talk about is?
So Lacey's asked, oh, Lacey, would you like to ask your question yourself, actually? Go ahead.
Hello. I have a question mainly structured on career changers versus students who have that kind of internship structure. For those of us who are transitioning in to UX research, any tips on tackling first projects, specifically in creating a useful and correct structure for yourself, working on projects solo? Any sort of advice or any sort of tips to kind of get a good process in place as we're doing it by ourselves?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that change as a field matures is that we start to develop frameworks and systems, right? And by leveraging those frameworks, you can kind of get a lot of the messiness into order and make sure that you're working in a way that will make a lot of sense to stakeholders and to people evaluating that work. It's really, really crucial to not reinvent the wheel. There's no reason to. So for example, at Intercom and at Wealthfront as well, where I work these days, we were very big into jobs to be done. Jobs to be done is actually a phenomenal framework. And if you choose to leverage it, there are very clear, and this is all available online, very clear interview questions, very clear, there you go, thank you, Amelia, the Jobs to be Done book. Or one of them, there's quite a few books these days about jobs to be done, but phenomenal framework. Leverage these sorts of frameworks in order to make sure your project is kind of just really easy to consume and really effective for anyone, for anyone consuming it. I think that's kind of my one tip. And again, going back to mentorship, if you're trying to transition, it doesn't matter if you're early in your career, just getting into UX, or you're trying to transition, mentorship is incredibly valuable and feedback is incredibly valuable. I told this to Casey earlier today. Why is it that so many of us don't ask for feedback? Just go at it by ourselves and just present it and never ask for feedback. My work is always infinitely better when I get feedback. And so you have to go get that feedback before you complete the work. That's really, really important.
Thanks, Noam. And I think that the point that you've made throughout is that for the questions and comments coming through, people can connect with you through UX coffee hours, through your LinkedIn. If there's anything that we've missed here today, I think those are really good spaces, as well as listening to your UX quests. We'll share all the links on Zoom and on Slack as well to connect in with you there.
Awesome.
So to wrap up, thank you so much, Noam, for joining us here on your Friday night after a long day, it sounds like. We really, really appreciate your insight, your thought, your honesty. We are very, very fortunate to have someone like you spend time with us this evening. And I love your point about the apparel. And we're looking at, maybe if UX Rescue has some apparel at some point in the future, we'll send it your way as well as a bit of a thank you for your time. I do have... we couldn't get this printed because we're all remote, but imagine this is a lovely little, thank you to Noam for your time today. So that's from all of us here at UX Rescue and our whole community. And we look forward to hearing what you're up to, following what you're doing on UX Quests. And thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was really, really my pleasure. Please do be in touch if you want. Anyone here, I'm open invitation. I'm so honored I got to do this and talk to you all. Made my day a lot better. And I'll just say that, I'm currently a large when it comes to t-shirt size, aspiring to go back to medium. We'll see if that works out. COVID-19 has not helped. But I'll I'll send you my address afterwards.
Perfect. Thank
Cheers,
you.
everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you so much, Noam.
My pleasure.